Hello and welcome to this in-depth book summary of Thinking, Fast and Slow, the seminal work on decision-making psychology by author Daniel Kahneman. Published in 2011, this international bestseller explores the two systems that drive how we think and make choices in life. Over the next minutes, I'll be providing an extended look at Kahneman's groundbreaking research on System 1 and System 2 thinking. We'll unpack all of his key insights, experiments, and conclusions so you can master an essential understanding of the inner machinery behind human judgment and decision-making. My goal is to give you a comprehensive overview of Kahneman's theories so you come away with clarity on how the mind operates along with practical tips for improving your own thinking. This includes illuminating common biases and heuristics, the roles of emotion and confidence, loss aversion, mental shortcuts, and more. Let's dive in. Part 1: Two Modes of Thought. Kahneman begins Thinking, Fast and Slow by introducing the dual process theory that mental activity contains two systems or modes known as System 1 and System 2. System 1 operates automatically, quickly, emotionally, and subconsciously. It's our intuitive system that allows us to effortlessly form impressions, make simple judgments, and execute rote behaviors. System 1 is constantly active, immediately perceiving, orienting, and reacting to whatever is happening around us without taxing our mental resources. For example, System 1 kicks in when we drive on an empty highway, engage in small talk, or understand simple sentences. Most of our thinking is handled on autopilot by System 1. In contrast, System 2 focuses conscious attention on mentally demanding activities. System 2 handles complex logical reasoning, deliberate calculations, controlled comparisons, and anything we describe as engaged concentration. It's activated when we fill out tax forms, follow complicated directions, or write a speech. But System 2 is also lazy. It prefers to let System 1 operate unless a situation calls for strenuous mental work that our intuitive reactions can't adequately handle. Because System 2 requires effort, we often avoid activating it even when needed. This leads to errors and biases. A key example is driving. On an open road, System 1 mostly handles driving automatically with little effort. But navigating rush hour traffic requires more engagement of System 2 to consciously monitor speed, lane changes, and more. However, the two systems continuously interact to direct our moment-to-moment thoughts and behaviors throughout life. Neither system is entirely above error. System 1 left unchecked leads to irrational judgments and cognitive biases. But an over-reliance on the exhausting deliberation of System 2 can also lead to poor decision-making when intuition would better serve us. The ideal is learning when to toggle between the two systems depending on context. Part 2: Cognitive Ease and Heuristics. In Part 2, Kahneman delves into how System 1 prefers coherence, relying on associative memory to match new inputs to existing patterns. This provides us with cognitive ease for quick and confident judgments that align with our instincts and emotions. But cognitive ease can also create problems. When our fast intuitions feel right thanks to cognitive ease, we become overconfident in our impressions or predictions. We don't stop to check them against facts. This illusion of validity flows from the coherence of a statement, not its accuracy. But coherence alone does not guarantee truth. To compensate for limited time and knowledge, System 1 often relies on substitution heuristics, mental shortcuts that replace difficult questions with simpler ones. For example, answering how easily examples come to mind substitutes for statistical probability. This saves effort but biases judgments. Additional heuristics include answering a question by substituting whether you recognize or can imagine the topic over researching its objective frequency. Vivid details also disproportionately sway assessments due to ease of imagination. But imaginability alone rarely equals reality. The planning fallacy similarly substitutes best-case scenarios for outcomes requiring serious analysis of past trends and potential hiccups. By swapping difficult probability weighing for simplistic optimism, we incorrectly estimate completion times on projects. In total, Kahneman demonstrates how cognitive ease and heuristics usually offer reasonable guesses but can mislead us. Counteracting them requires correcting intuitive impressions against facts, not letting fluency alone dictate judgments. System 2 logic should override System 1 at times. Part 3 Framing and Prospect Theory. Moving to Part 3, Kahneman overviews his seminal prospect theory experiments on how framing choices as potential gains or losses dramatically alters decision-making. People tend to avoid risk when presented with options framed as gains but seek risk when the same choices are framed as losses. For example, when a positive outcome is framed as the status quo and an action might lose that, people become loss-averse. They prefer to avoid potential loss over probable gain. But when the action is framed as producing a gain over the status quo, they reverse towards risk tolerance. This demonstrates that losing hurts more than winning feels good, a phenomenon known as loss aversion. Framing choices relative to a reference point radically shifts preferences. People also use heuristics to evaluate choices relative to anchors versus objectively. Kahneman further explores how we feel certainty to be more valuable than mere probability, even if irrational. Given two equal choices with the same expected outcome, one certain and one merely probable, people substitute ease of evaluation for statistical validity, pursuing certainty over likelihood. Overall, prospect theory reveals that situational framing guides decisions as much or more than rational calculation. Mental accounting, context, and emotion shape System 1 heuristics that often overlooked objective value. System 2 logic must be applied to correct for this. Part 4 Overconfidence. Moving on to Part 4, Kahneman dives deeply into the innate tendency towards overconfidence that stems from System 1 substitution heuristics. For example, we routinely substitute answering the easy question, "Do I recognize this?" for the much harder evaluation of what is the full scope of my knowledge. This availability heuristic leads us to inflate expertise on any topic we know something about while ignoring all that we don't know. We substitute recognition for totality. Overconfidence flows from the coherence fallacy of the familiar. Kahneman also demonstrates how we consistently underestimate the time needed to complete projects. When asked how long a task will take, we substitute the facile question, "How long could this take in ideal conditions?" instead of analyzing potential obstacles. This question substitution skips reflective consideration of past experiences where delays occurred. Without critically consulting System 2 on probabilities, System 1 heuristically assumes flawless execution, leading to pervasive underestimation. To demonstrate this, Kahneman had students estimate completion times for academic papers, finding 97% of predictions fell short. Despite lived experience with delays, intuitive ease encouraged underestimating. System 2 analysis was skipped. Distrusting fluency is essential to counteract overconfidence. Part 5 Intuition, Emotion, and Self-Control. Now in Part 5, Kahneman shifts to exploring how emotions interact with thinking. While we view ourselves as rational, emotions powerfully shape both System 1 intuition and System 2 analysis, often covertly. Happy moods encourage creative, broad System 1 thinking, while fear or skepticism shifts people towards narrower System 2 focus. But neither is perfectly rational. Emotion inherently biases mental operations. Kahneman notes even judges ruling on parole cases approve around 65% after meals, but only 10% beforehand, as hunger impacts mood and decision-making. Our intuitive system is also shaped by genetics, personality, and experience. Kahneman advises suspecting choices aligned with your emotions or identity, as System 1 heuristics will validate your desires, not evaluate them rationally. Pursuing accuracy requires self-control to pause, critically reflect with System 2, and potentially challenge comfortable conclusions. Training in statistical thinking can improve calibration of probabilities separate from emotional hopes. And rather than trust familiar patterns, Kahneman suggests constantly questioning your environment. System 1 jumps to conclusions while System 2 asks probing questions before deciding. Intuition alone has limits. Part 6: Choices and Prospect Theory. In Part 6 of the book summary, we come to Kahneman's famous experiments on prospect theory mentioned earlier. Through clever framing of options as either gains or losses relative to a reference point, he demonstrates loss aversion, where losses hurt substantially more than equal gains feel good. A specific example was asking, in addition to whatever you own, you have been given $1,000. You are now asked to choose between a sure gain of $500 or a 50% chance at gaining $1,000. Which would you take? Overwhelmingly, people chose the sure gain of $500, avoiding risk. But when asked to choose between a sure loss of $500 and a 50% chance of losing $1,000 out of their $1,000, people reversed towards risk tolerance on the same probabilities, not wanting to accept the certain loss of $500. Framing outcomes as losses versus gains directly shaped choices more than odds. Kahneman also discovered that people tend to evaluate choices relative to arbitrary starting reference points rather than objectively. We consider value in our current state versus potential gains or losses, not absolute value. If our reference point was changed, it shifts preferences. Furthermore, certain losses are pursued even when greater than probable gains. And a 50% chance of a loss feels worse than the reduced but guaranteed loss. Probability weighting satisfies a desire for certainty over expected value. Many biases emerge from System 1 heuristics around loss aversion. Part 7: Rare Events, Predictions, and Expertise. Now in Part 7 of the animated book summary, we come to Kahneman's research on how people misjudge rare events and predictions. He notes extreme likelihoods are intuitively hard to estimate. We lack System 2 capacity to correctly weigh tiny probabilities. For example, which is more likely getting attacked by a shark or struck by lightning? People substitute scary headlines for statistics, so shark attacks feel more likely. But in the U.S., lightning strikes are 30 times more probable than shark attacks. Vividness overrides actual frequency. People also commonly create best-case scenarios when asked about completion times and results. Wanting projects to succeed introduces optimism bias that ignores past delays and risks. Motivational distortions impair predictive accuracy. To improve, Kahneman advises averaging out previous outcomes. Finally, Kahneman overviews how presumed expertise is often an illusion. Substituting familiarity for validity creates overconfidence. True experts accept the limits of intuition and deliberately use System 2 thinking to audit and correct quick impressions through objective data testing and statistical aggregation of probabilities. Developing true expertise requires compiling vast amounts of external feedback to overcome the noise in any one person's experience. Simply trusting familiar mental patterns without ongoing verification leads experts astray. Hubris must be replaced with humility. Part 8: Improving Judgment. Approaching the close of the animated book summary, Kahneman shifts to advice on improving judgment. He advocates developing awareness of the biases flowing from System 1 heuristics. Catalog where instincts mislead. Vigilance against cognitive traps prevents errors. Specifically, Kahneman advises identifying circumstances where your emotions or self-interest might cloud System 1 intuitions and prompt poor substitution heuristics. Then activate deliberate System 2 logic, listing multiple alternate perspectives before deciding. Don't let desires dictate. Furthermore, rather than relying on fluency, vivid anecdotes, or familiarity, consciously consult base rates, statistics, and past objective patterns when making predictions or decisions. System 2 must override System 1. Incremental blocking of biases compounds into accuracy. You can also improve judgment by seeking diverse feedback. Kahneman notes we are blind to our own blindness, but others can identify our biases and steer us right. Wisdom emerges from broad inputs. Surround yourself with honest relationships and varied mental models. In conclusion, Kahneman's thinking, fast and slow, masterfully reveals the machinery behind human judgment, demonstrating how two different but interconnected systems drive our thinking in ways we often don't recognize. Harnessing these insights, we can utilize our mental capacities while improving on inborn limitations. System 1 intuition and System 2 deliberation both offer strengths, but also potential downfalls. Learning to spot substitution heuristics and other biases enables us to thoughtfully choose when to trust versus verify our quick impressions and gut reactions based on context. Understanding the role of loss aversion, emotional associations, overconfidence, and substitution heuristics empowers us to make sounder choices, better predictions, and improved expert judgments through heightened rationality and self-awareness. I hope this animated book summary provided a helpful overview of thinking fast and slow. Please subscribe for more useful content.